Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. It's just me today. Hi! Do you like it? I was not planning on creating another solo episode for some time. I actually didn't have plans to create any solo episodes, but the episode that I created explaining the why behind the podcast and sharing the story about my mom, so many of you reached out to me that I felt like this has to be an ongoing story. This has to be something that follows us where we get a sense of closure. Because as you could tell from that episode, I don't have closure on that whole situation. And there's so many questions and there's so many rabbit holes that I can go down. What better way to do that than on a podcast? Oh, it kind of blows my mind a little bit. Because I was not planning on sharing that story with you. I did so because I just finished reading Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And so I figured, okay, well, I have to talk about this. And then when I recorded the episode, it became clear of this is not a 5-minute story. This is not even a 30-minute story. This is a lifelong story. And I already told you a couple of reasons why I was nervous about sharing it. The biggest reason is that it's not just me. And it's not just my mom either. There's other people involved. There's my sister, my dad, my dad's whole side of the family, my mom's whole side of the family. And they're all a part of that in some way. I've been so lodged in my own perspective on the whole dang thing that it has not felt responsible for me to be talking about it, because what feels responsible is to talk about it in a way that's fair to all parties involved. I was hurt. I've been very hurt by the whole thing and have not, still even to this day, I still don't think that I've landed on that bird's eye view of the situation. And there's a lot of credit that I owe my mom that I'm not able to give her because of that hurt. And if you have a complicated relationship with a parent or a child, you can probably feel what that is. It's like, hey, I know that they're trying, I know that they're doing their best, but my goodness, the way that we are bouncing off of each other in reality, that is not a healthy way of being. And I need to call out some BS. So, what I wanted to say is thank you so much for pressing play and listening to all of this, because I mean, you have other things to do. There's so many other things you could be doing. And to be honest, it doesn't really feel like I have had a family. I felt very alone, very kind of orphaned. And hearing how this story relates with all of you brings up the feeling of family inside of me. And so for that, I'm so grateful, because I was nervous that the story was going to be TMI. I cried. You caught that. You probably cried with me, because how can you watch somebody cry and not cry? And so I was nervous that the crying was going to be a big bummer. I was nervous just in general of revealing my current state, because I know that I'm putting this out there to anybody who wants to see it, and everybody who's looking at it has a completely different vantage point on reality and sees me in a completely different way. So felt I was nervous to expose that. And what I would really love to do today in today's episode is talk a little bit about something I'm very passionate about and something that I've learned a lot about out of necessity. And that is negative emotions. Actually, I don't want to say negative emotions. I want to say unpleasant emotions. From the time I was a very small child, I remember experiencing a lot of unpleasant emotions. Over the course of a day, they would greatly outweigh any pleasant emotions. And so, what I'd love to do is talk through my process for dealing with that. As a 36-year-old person, it's really hard to make it through a day in the world when you're filled with unpleasant feelings inside, with all of the adult responsibilities and obligations. I mean, it can turn life into a real suckaroo. And so we need to have ways of managing that so that life gets better over time. What I would love to do right now is share with you uh, a, a process for managing unpleasant emotions and shift into talking about more pleasant emotions and how do we make that a bigger part of our reality when we're stuck in the land of life sucks. Mm-hmm. All right. Here's the most helpful thing I found about negative emotions. And I discovered this probably a year ago. So I lived 35 years without this tool. And about a year ago, I learned of a tool called AVP, which I'll get into in just a moment. But before I do that, let me tell you where I learned AVP from. I learned AVP from Dr. Becky Kennedy. Are you familiar with her work? I found Dr. Becky on Instagram because she lives in New York and makes a lot of talking videos while she's walking in busy New York streets. And she is addressing parents in real time about issues and problems with kids that are just blowing the minds of parents in terms of how do I handle this situation with my kid? How do I handle this temper tantrum? How do I handle this rude remark? How do I handle them waking up one day and being a teenager and being into completely different things that maybe I don't approve of? And so she's right in the thick of it with you. She has 3 kids of her own at different phases in life. And I would call her a child whisperer or like a kid whisperer. She understands fundamentally what the child is experiencing. And then she's giving the adult scripts, literally things to say and things to do to intervene and teach kids the skills that they need in order to move forward. Her whole approach is called Good Inside. And it's based on the premise that kids are good inside fundamentally, that we are all good inside, but that sometimes we have a hard time. And when we have a hard time, oh, well, we just don't behave very well, do we? Mm. And she recognizes that. She recognizes there's a distinction between a person's identity and their behavior. And so she makes a very clear distinction that a child's feelings are always okay, even if the behavior that they're demonstrating is not okay. And that we can actually address both of those two things at the same time. We can help teach our kids the regulation skills they need to properly manage their feelings, and at the same time, create boundaries so that their behavior is more pro-social. Well, I don't have kids. So I was a little bit surprised to find myself obsessed with her work. I found myself anytime I was on Instagram, I would stop on anything she said. I would send it to Ollie. We would talk about it. We bought her book. We read her book. We listened to her book several times. Saw her on every single podcast appearance that she's ever been on. Asked her, of course, to come onto this podcast, but Becky, where are you? I think she's a little bit of too much of a big deal for me right now, but don't worry, we'll get her. Okay, so Becky has this tool called AVP. It's an acronym. You ready for it? A means acknowledge, V means validate, P means permit. So here's the dealio. When we feel an unpleasant emotion, our first step is A, acknowledge. Acknowledgement means that we take a moment and we try to label what is going on inside of us. This is really difficult because most of us have stopped paying attention to our body's signals to the point that we don't know really what we're feeling. We feel this ambiguous, unpleasant burbling up of something that we kind of are like, oh, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. I got to do this. I got to do that. And if we're lucky on a good day, it kind of diffuses on its own. But on a day where there's too many demands, we haven't had a breakfast, our hormones are in a weird spot, whatever the case, on a different day, you might find a situation where that ambiguous, amorphous blob of bad feeling, it becomes so big that it actually explodes out of us in the form of frustration, in the form of anger, overwhelm, bursting into tears, all of that stuff, right? Well, if I'm getting to that point, there were signs that this thing was building inside of me for a long time, and I was not paying attention or doing anything with those signs. And let me tell you, as a person who was trained to, oh, let me phrase this a different way. We'll come back to the A. This all connects back into the A, but let's go on a little storytime adventure. The storytime adventure is my mom was raising us in the 90s, and she was coming out of a parenting style that was the spanking, hitting parenting style. That is what her parents used on her. And the child experts, parenting experts at the time, were moving away from that model towards a time out model. My mom was reading the parenting books. She was learning from the intelligence of the time. She's a product of her time in very many ways, which is why another reason why it's like I can't blame her. Okay, so she was like, we're gonna do timeouts. We're not gonna do the spanking situation. So thank you for that. However, timeouts ended up in my house. So the application was, I had a big feeling that exploded out of me in the form of bad behavior. My mom looked at that bad behavior and was like, oh no, I don't like that behavior. So, Brentan, go sit in timeout. Then, when I was reintroduced back into the situation, as long as my behavior changed, it was like problem solved. So, there was no follow up discussion about what was I feeling that led to that behavior in the first place. What can I do next time I feel this big feeling so that I don't need to behave in this destructive way, but is there a way to dance with the feeling in such a way where I'm behaving in a way that's seen as more appropriate to the room around me? And of course, there was also no like recognition of other people's role in the situation. So if I went into timeout because, let's say, I was fighting with my sister, perhaps there was some culpability on her side, right? Um, Perhaps the way that the timeout was instructed to me was a little bit of an overreaction on my mom's part. Maybe there was more force or frustration than was necessary. And so there was never any repair attempt that was made after the timeout to reestablish the connection between us, nor was there any teaching of skills that would help me regulate my feelings and thus my behavior. Okay, repeat this in some cases 2 or 3 times a day for several years. And then this turns into, when I get too old for timeouts, it turns into restriction and grounding. And that is sort of treated in the same way. Over time, what this produced inside of me was two things: self-doubt and self-loathing. Self-doubt is, ooh, maybe I'm not really feeling that. Maybe that didn't really just happen. Maybe I'm overreacting. This isn't a big deal. I shouldn't be feeling this way. That's what self-doubt is. Let me tell you, that is a BITC mother effing H. That is what that is. Self-doubt. You maybe have some too. Think about it. Self-doubt. When you feel a feeling in your body, do you trust that feeling? Do you say, thank you so much, feeling, for alerting me to information, to a situation that requires my attention? No. We're like, my feelings are bad. Why are they bad? Because every time I have them, I behave in this way, and then I get into timeout. So if my feelings lead to timeout, if my feelings lead to restriction and grounding, oh my God, they must be the worst things in the world. Don't pay attention to your feelings. Okay? After years, decades of that, snap. I have no concept of what I'm feeling any of the time. That's what that does. That's just half of what that does. That's the self-doubt. The self-loathing part is, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I always do this. I always overreact. Gosh, like, why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just be a person who doesn't have a strong reaction to this thing or that thing? Maybe it's okay that this person treats me like crap. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. I deserve it. Whew, that's not any better than self-doubt. All of this happens when we don't have the tool and then the skill to use the tool. Two different things. We need a tool and we need the skill to use the tool. Okay? We're going to build all of this together right now. So stay with me, because where were we on our AVP train? We were at the A, right? A is acknowledge. It is going to be difficult for you to acknowledge if, like me, you grew up and learned to distrust your feelings and you learned that you were bad for having them. So your AVP journey is going to look like this. You're going to feel something yucky in your body. And instead of ignoring it like you normally do, you are going to say to yourself, that's a yucky feeling. Practice it. Say it out loud with me right now. Wow, that's a yucky feeling. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We actually don't even need to get more specific than that. Not today. And in fact, today, all we need to do is say that to ourselves one time. We might feel 30 yucky feelings today at like discrete different moments in time. And even if you ignore all of those, except for one, you just say it on one yucky feeling, you are building the skill. If you find after listening to this that you go a couple of days without saying this to yourself, then we need to back your skill building up one notch, back it up, back it up. And what you're going to do is you're going to put an alarm in your phone that says AVP for sometime every day. Sometime when you're alone, like not on a work call, not picking up your kids, right before bed, early in the morning, whatever you like think about it critically. Like, what's a good time in my day typically to ask myself, what am I feeling? You put that in there, and every time it pops up and it says ping, AVP, you say, what do I need to acknowledge? What am I feeling right now? And really, you can use this tool not just for unpleasant emotions, you might even do it for the positive ones. You won the lottery, baby. How do you feel? Let's acknowledge that. Yeah, let's acknowledge it. Acknowledge. You don't need to have the fancy language for it right now. There is a skill of building fluency with your feelings. And there are resources that can help you get into the nuance of what exactly you're feeling. Okay? We got Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of nonviolent communication, in his book called Nonviolent Communication. He has a whole feelings list. If you were to go to ChatGPT and ask, what are some feelings that I might feel? It'll give you a feelings list. And probably 10 years ago, I found out about Marshall Rosenberg, not to like totally go on a side quest here, but we're doing it. I found Marshall Rosenberg when I was in my early 20s in Chicago. So like 12, 13 years ago, read his book, was like, what? I'm supposed to know what I'm feeling? And that rattled around in my brain for probably like a decade of just, ugh. But what I would do is when I felt something intense and I was like, oh, like this feeling makes me want to go do something that I know I'm going to regret, like say something to somebody that I'm going to regret, or just, like go do something destructive that I know I'm going to regret. Like, I'm the adult now. I need to clean up those messes. So let me make life nicer for my future self by not totally self-sabotaging this stuff. So I would go to his book and look through his feelings list and just wait for my body to have a natural reaction to something like, that's it. And my body would have that reaction. Your body knows what you're feeling. Your brain doesn't know what you're feeling. Your brain is like, I have no freaking clue. And it's supposed to be like that, actually, because our emotions are locked in a different part of our brain. Our brain is so cool. It's built in like these layers of these evolutionary layers. So the earliest, most primal part of our brain that is the part that's like controlling our heartbeat and our digestion and all of the things that, like, even if I tried to think about this stuff, I wouldn't be able to perceive it. Why can't I perceive it? Oh, because that's in a deeper, more primal, evolutionarily, it is an earlier part of the brain. And so part of the reason why we have such a hard time with our feelings is because the part of our brain that knows language and wants to label things and identify things is a much evolutionary later part of the brain than the part of our brain that actually has the feeling state. And so this is where it's creating that problem for us, where we don't know how to talk about it, we don't know how to put words to it. It's normal. It's supposed to be like this. It's crazy. It's crazy. But the more fluency we have, the more we can look through a list of feelings and say, do I feel this or do I feel that? And the more nuanced we get, so the more distinctions that we can build between feelings, like, precisely what is the difference between anger and frustration? And if we can sit and we can parse that out, it actually makes us feel more calm, because there is a calming effect to hitting the nail right on the head. Just by you saying, I feel like this, and when that's right, when that's correct, your body sighs. Whew. Your body has a moment of gratitude, of like, thank you for seeing me. Thank you for getting to know me. Oh, and this is what the A has the potential to do for us in our process of AVP. You ready for V? V is a validation, baby. Validation. Okay, so we went from acknowledge. I have a label for it. That label might be precise, it may be abstract. Who cares? I'm practicing naming it. I'm getting more skilled at that. Every day that I do it, I'm building skill. Look at me go. Look at me go. Okay, now we're on the V. V means validation. Validation is so cool, because validation is basically saying, you know what? I believe my feelings. I believe that the feelings my body is experiencing are real, they're valid, hence the word validation. They're here for a reason. And validation is the really fun part of this exercise, because validation is where you get to complain. So if you're someone who really struggles with unpleasant emotions, you will probably notice that a lot of your mental energy is spent complaining. The problem is that those complaints are not mapped back to the feeling initially, like, oh, I'm feeling this way. Why am I feeling this way? Why are you, oh, yucky feeling? Why are you there? What are you trying to say to me? Okay, that's crucial. That's crucial, because if you just let the wheel go on the complaints, you're never going to get anywhere. Okay, you can have the conversation with your mom, with your sister, with your husband, with your wife, whoever is there for you. You can have the conversation where you're spinning through your complaints. Do you feel better? I don't. That's because a complaint on its own, it needs to be sandwiched. It needs to be sandwiched between my A and my P. Okay? So validation is, why am I feeling this way? Okay? Yep. Didn't get a good night's sleep last night. Ugh. The dog peed on the floor and I had to clean that up as soon as I woke up. Then I went into work. There's 30 emails in my inbox. All of them are urgent. There's unplanned work on my desk, needs to get done today. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. This is where we can kind of counteract some of that self-doubt that maybe got instilled in us from a young age, because now we can start to build evidence that our feelings are trying to help us. Okay, they're not our enemy. Oh, our feelings are trying to keep us safe. They're trying to say, do more of this, do less of that. Oh, and it's so hard to read them. It's so hard to know what to do about it. I know it gets us so confused and frustrated. My gosh, I know. But they're here for a reason. And actually, that feels kind of like a relief too, doesn't it? You tell me. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to cover on validation. Let's move on to P. We'll see if we need to circle back. P is permit. So now you got the whole thing. It's AVP, acknowledge, validate, permit. Permission is very straightforward. I give myself permission to feel what I'm feeling. I give myself permission to feel what I'm feeling. I mean, what a revolution. Because when we feel these unpleasant things, how many times do we say, I don't have time for this, I shouldn't be feeling this, I don't have time to feel this, I can't deal with this right now? And what we're doing is we're either buying ourselves time because we're avoiding it, or we're trying to pretend like it doesn't exist because we're in denial. So we have these tactics that we use to try to deal with our emotions that we know are actually not the best strategies. How do we know that? Because our life looks the way that it looks right now, right? It could look a lot better. With permission, what we're really saying is it's okay to be who I am right now. It's okay to have this feeling. And we really need to feel that because we don't feel it enough. And I don't know about you, but there's almost no one in my life that I can turn to who's like, hey, Brentan, it's okay for you to feel that way. The last time you shared how you were feeling with somebody, did they try to fix it? Did they offer you advice? Did that help? What helps is feeling like you belong, even in your worst moments. And oh my gosh, what if you could create that feeling for yourself? That's what the P enables you to do. So, AVP. What's the A? Say it. Say it loud. I want to hear it. What's the A? Okay. That was okay, but we're going to do the V now. But you got to say it louder because I didn't really hear you on the A. So what's the V? Okay, very good. And what's the P? Okay. And when are you going to practice this? Tell me, when are you going to practice this? Okay. To tie off AVP with one delicious bow is capping the whole thing off with some sort of affirmation of, I can handle this. Give yourself a vote of confidence at the very end. Whatever it is that is creating the unpleasant feelings that now is prompting you to give ABP to yourself, you can handle that thing. Give yourself that vote of confidence. Now, let's talk more about positive or pleasant emotions, because the whole goal here is to experience less unpleasant emotions and more pleasant emotions. AVP will enable you to calm yourself down, to regulate what you're feeling so that your feelings do not explode out of your body and create mayhem for you and everyone you love. It also gives you the space to have a more clear headed conversation with yourself about how you want to show up to these difficult situations in your life. So it's creating the conditions for you to start making different choices so that you play differently in these situations and you start to get more wins under your belt. So some of experiencing positive emotion or pleasant emotion is going to be just racking up enough of those wins that over time, the weather inside starts to change. And it goes from being, like Seattle overcast all of the time to sunny San Diego most of the time. But there's also these kind of learned thought patterns, beliefs. Even our identity is a learned thing. This idea of I am this person, I have these strengths, I have these weaknesses, I'm capable of this, I'm not capable of that. All of this is baked in at a level that's difficult to perceive, even for people who pride themselves on challenging their own beliefs and, holding opinions loosely and having an open mind. Even for those of us for whom we really strive to be that way, it's challenging. Beliefs are, by their very nature, invisible. And so sometimes we need to, in addition to working with our emotions in a different way, we actually have to work with our thought patterns and the language we use when we talk to ourselves internally. And this can get really tricky, at least for me, because I've been around the woo woo world. Yoga's pretty woo woo. Uh, I've been in a lot of different communities, spiritual communities, yoga communities, and I've drank the Kool-Aid of several different factions. And they're the whole like law of attraction space um used to really grate on me because I wasn't in a place where I could do anything with it because I was just frankly experiencing way too many unpleasant emotions, and so I needed something like AVP to kind of help bring me more into the shallow end. But law of attraction now is much more attractive to me because I feel like I'm in a place where I can actually do some of that mental stuff. But, for example, setting affirmations. Affirmations are just like, I'm the best. I can do anything I set my mind to, the that sort of things. So once you kind of get to the place where AVP feels a little bit more natural to you, you feel like you have a little bit of space to dream. What you really are looking for is an opening in your life where you feel truly in somewhere inside of you, in one cell of your whole being, where you feel like life could change drastically and for the better. You need to get to that part. You need to get to the place where you feel like everything could change overnight and it could all be flipping fantastic. That is the degree of optimism that you are looking for. And it doesn't need to be like you're totally bought into that idea. It just needs to be that that thought appeared to you one time. Because as soon as you have that thought, you're going to have the other thoughts that pile on that's like, okay, but no, actually, blah, 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 all your party poopers. But as long as you have that one thought, like somewhere in the system, you can locate it. Well, now you got something that you can go with. And so what you really need to do is start opening up more time in your life to daydream. And I'm someone who used to daydream all the time. I got through my childhood by fantasizing all kinds of cool adulthoods, most of which I was like winning Academy Awards for Best Actress, which maybe will still happen. But the problem with how I was daydreaming or fantasizing as a kid was that I was always daydreaming, like kind of watching myself as if I were as if my life were captured on film. So I was outside of my body, looking at myself up on the stage, accepting the Academy Award. And what I learned in the past few years is that's not actually how you get anything done. Because what you really need to do in these situations is daydream from your own point of view. So the right way to daydream, let's say, about winning an Academy Award is, can I feel myself in the dress that I would wear? Can I feel myself hearing my name, making the reaction? Can I see myself turning around to the people I'm sitting with and walking up onto the stage and looking out and being blinded by the lights, but like I can still see my supporters, and I'm thinking in my head about all the people at home who aren't here with me, who are probably jumping up and screaming in their living rooms. That is how we want to be daydreaming. We want to be daydreaming about how does it feel like to be myself in these better situations. And there's a couple ways we can do this, because when you are stuck in a rut, it's really hard to imagine. It's really hard to imagine a better life. Like, how are things going to turn up for me? Like, I have this issue, it snowballs into this issue, it snowballs into this issue. I'm so freaking underwater here that it feels like this is an impossible mountain. And when you're in that stage, you have to go AVP all the way until you get that glimmer of possibility. And then you know that you're ready to start doing some of this daydreaming work. And you might be different, but I found for me that what I'm really after in life is two things. One, I want to feel unrushed. Two, I want to feel like there is plenty. That's what I really want. Because our modern world is speeding up. Whatever metric we want to break this down by, things are speeding up. You can feel that in your own life. I was at a kid's birthday party this weekend, and my gosh, the speed at which they were flipping out about this neon blue cake was mind-boggling to me. The speed at which I move when I am working through tasks, or when I'm thinking about my schedule. The speed at which I move when I wake up in the morning, my freaking gosh. It seems like speed and time are sometimes not on my side. And so what I really want is to feel unrushed. I know that sounds like a pipe dream, but this is where it starts. And the feeling of plenty, who doesn't want plenty? I mean, the feeling of lack, we will organize our whole lives around our feeling of lack. We will make our lives so freaking small because we are scared that we don't have something that we should have, or that we won't have something that we need. I don't want to live like that. I want to live in a world where I am unrushed and there is plenty. Okay. Now I have some clarity around that. And it's actually good to get clarity around what you want at a feeling level versus in sort of like a circumstance level. You know, it's easy to fantasize about the business that I'm going to build and the homes that I'm going to build and the homes I'm going to buy and the trips I'm going to go on and the friendships I'm going to make and all of that stuff, right? Like that's the fun part of it. And there is some daydreaming that needs to happen along those lines as well, so that I can direct my life in a particular direction. But the thing that really moves the needle here towards more positive feelings is having time every day to sit and daydream about the feeling states that we're going after. The feeling state of being unrushed. The feeling state of having plenty. What does that feel like in my body? And if I have dedicated time to daydream about this, and I'm saying daydream, like this is not a strict meditation practice or something like that. Nah. You can do this while you're driving your car. You can do this in your journal, during your yoga practice, while you're taking a shower, while you're going for your walk. On mornings when I wake up feeling really the opposite way, really rushed, really lackey, I lay in bed for an extra 5 minutes and I daydream about these feeling states and I see what I can call up into my body during that time. But I only do that after I give myself AVP. Because you can see how on this positive side of things, maybe you've heard even in the last couple of years, the idea of toxic positivity, where it's tricky stuff here. It's really freaking tricky, right? Like we want to have good feelings, pleasant feelings, but we don't want to do that by ignoring all of the bad shit. We still need to deal with life as it happens, the reality of the situations that we're in, and those situations are difficult. Life is difficult. It's supposed to be like that. It's okay that it's like that. What we need are tools and skills. So on the mornings when I wake up feeling crazy, I lay for a few more minutes and I daydream about the feeling states and I cultivate those in my body. And I try to write in my journal on those days as well. And I will say that what this does is it has started giving me the awareness of how often I feel the other way, the unpleasant way, and what those unpleasant feelings do to my thinking patterns, which in turn determine what I say out loud to myself and other people, which in turn determines what they say back to me. And an entire relationship can be completely changed. I've seen this with me and Ollie even just this year. Us in some way, like my relationship with him is my life's task. I think seeing my parents, how they combusted and how that just it it was a life task I think maybe he wanted, but she just was not willing to go to accept that as her task to like have a good relationship with him. I'm the opposite. He's my guy. We're here through thick and thin. And even this last year, since I've started adopting, first it was AVP and now it's more of the positivity transition, more of the law of attraction stuff. Our conversations have completely changed. Our planning for the future has completely changed. My level of optimism, sense of possibility, of adventure has completely shifted and changed. And so this move from more unpleasant feelings to more pleasant feelings does not need to feel like this big disciplined approach. If you're a perfectionist like I am, you probably have like this inner manager who's always trying to like coach you or control you, make sure you do all the right things. You get up and you do your morning routine and whatnot. There's still maybe like that a little activation of that piece of me, but for the most part, this has felt like a very kind, effective, natural approach. And I think we're at a place where we can tie this up. So let's do that the right way. Let's tie it off the right way. What did we talk about today? Unpleasant feelings and pleasant feelings. Unpleasant feelings, we talked about a tool called AVP that helps you acknowledge, validate, and give yourself permission to feel your feelings. We talked about adding on to that tool one extra boost of self-confidence, which is the recognition that I got this, I can handle this situation. We talked about building the skill around that. It's one thing to have the tool, quite another to actually do something with it. And so to do something with it, your job is every single day for the rest of your life, one time in that day, AVP. And now you're going to watch that snowball into 2 times AVP, 3 times AVP, 4 times AVP. And soon, anytime you feel an unpleasant feeling, naturally you're going to be like, I recognize it. What's going on? Ooh, why am I feeling this? Oh, yes, that's interesting. Okay, it's okay that I feel this. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, and guess what? I can handle this. Boom. We're set up. We are set up to tolerate our unpleasant feelings. Maybe we still don't know what to do with every single one of them. That's okay. Skill builds over time, and we need to be okay with that. Stop obsessing over perfection. I know you can't do that, like you're going to do it anyway. But when I catch myself obsessing about perfection, my strategy is, hey, remember where you started. That's the antidote really to perfectionism, is stop, because perfectionism is you comparing yourself to the end goal. So what you need to do with perfectionism is stop, no end goal. Instead you look back, you're like, oh, well, where did I start? Hot damn, I'm proud of where I came from. On the pleasant emotion side of things, we talked about daydreaming. We talked about finding that moment in your life where you recognize, okay, some part of me is open to the future being really freaking awesome. So key. We need to get to that point. Every single one of us needs to get to that point. I don't care how effed the world is. I don't care who our president is. I don't care how our climate is. I don't care how our world relations are. We need to get to the point where we are optimistic about the future. We're looking for that glimmer. And once we notice that we have that glimmer, we say, I need daydreaming time in my day. I don't need to add it in. I can do my daydreaming during some other thing that I'm already doing. So I don't have the excuse of I don't have time. And I'm going to add daydreaming in. And when I daydream, yes, I'm going to think about the circumstances that I want. And when I think about those circumstances, I'm going to try to think about it from the first person perspective. How does it feel to be me in that situation? But even more than daydreaming about the circumstances, what I really want to daydream about are the feeling states that I want to feel more of. For me, that's unrushed and plenty. Like I feel that in my body. My body knows what that is. It's experienced it several times in my life. I could recall it at this point. Maybe that resonates with you. Maybe you want to add on to it. Maybe that's not exactly what feels good with your body. So be on the lookout for the words that you feel in here. And if all of this is new to you, you're like, oh my gosh, I have a body? I thought I was just this talking head. I get it. I really get it. I've felt this way for most of my life. And it's okay. Let me give you some AVP right now, because we could do this to each other too. Whatever you're feeling right now, whatever that is, let's acknowledge it. You don't need to have the language for it. Just notice. Why do you have that feeling? It makes sense. It makes sense that you're feeling this way because things happen in your life. Something happened. And now you feel this way. And guess what? It's perfectly okay for you to feel this way. And you can handle it. With that, my friend, let's close this out. Give yourself some AVP today. Give everyone in your life AVP. When they are expressing a feeling to you, what's your job? AVP. You don't need to solve their problem. You don't need to fix it. AVP. AVP. If you hear someone complaining, you're like, God, this person's complaining. What are they doing? They're doing the V. Figure out what the A is. Then give them the P to feel it. A V without an A and a P. Ugh. What are we doing here? It's not grounded. It's not rooted in anything. You need to get back to that feeling. That's so hard. But you can do it. You got this, my friend. Be in touch, okay? However, you know how to get in touch with me. And tell me how this went for you. Tell me how AVP is going for you. Tell me how your manifestation is going for you when you get to the positive stuff. And we're going to do this together. I'll be right here with you the whole